Good to see all of you this morning. A little bit of report from Africa. We've had some real good news this week. Our gospel meeting that we had in Malawi, the big meeting with over 10,000 in attendance, they're continuing to study with a lot of the contacts that they made while they were there, and we'll be hearing reports over the next several weeks. But it's been a couple of weeks since the meeting was over, and they've recently had 17 more baptized into Christ. So that's really, really good news. There's a gospel meeting in Malawi that ended today, and this is the school taking a couple of the teachers and some of the students out, and you brethren here sponsor a lot of these meetings, and probably this one was one of the ones that y'all sponsored. The meeting ended today, and they had 24 that were baptized into Christ. Really a good meeting. And I think they had 600 or 700 in attendance. Our radio programs, we sent funds to 12 different locations in 6 different nations for our radio programs. Some of them are 30-minute programs, some of them are 45-minute programs, some of them are 1-hour programs. Some of the ones that's an hour program, they do about 40, 45 minutes of preaching and then 15 minutes at the end of question and answers where people in the audience can call in and ask Bible questions, and they're really doing great. We sent the funds for June, July, and August. Some of them started in June, some of them didn't start till July, some of them didn't start till the end of July. So we're going to be sending more funds coming up pretty soon. But of the ones that have reported, and we've got 4 places that haven't reported of the 12. So of the ones that have reported, they report 357 baptisms, 138 restored, and hundreds of people that they're studying the Bible with. I know one of the churches in Ndola, up in the northeastern part, they're studying with a family. And I think one of them is a member of the church. It's been restored, one of the spouses. I don't know if it's the husband or the wife. And the other one's on the verge of being baptized. And there's about 10 or 12 kids. And 3 or 4 of those are old enough to obey the gospel. So they're about to pick up 12 to 14 members in that little congregation of about 30 from this one family. So they're excited about that. And some other folks from various denominations and even from some religious groups that don't even believe in God are about to obey the gospel. So we'll hear some wonderful things over the next few weeks about that. We'll be sending more funds coming up probably in the next week or so. We'll be sending funds to get them through the end of the year, probably around $2,000. And I just don't know of anywhere that radio programs are doing this great work. The average radio program is $50. Some of them are 20-something, some are 30, and one is 50 or 55. So they're averaging about $50 for 30 to 60 minutes, and they're on once a week. And they're preaching in their local languages. So the people are getting to hear. There's only one school, and the brethren that are teaching at that school don't speak the local language. So they're speaking, and theirs is being translated. They're speaking in English, and it's being translated, and they're not getting very much results. So we're going to find some of the students that have graduated from the school that are faithful, solid gospel preachers, and let them preach in their own language, and we think it'll do better. So keep praying for that. Lots of good things happening with those radio programs. And a lot of those places are telling us that they've got 20, 30, 40 people that want to study the Bible, and more than they can take care of. So they're having to get help to do Bible studies. That's a nice problem to have, and nice problem to have. In Genesis 16, continuing our story of the study of Abraham, and Sarah is barren, we're told, and God has promised Abraham that he's going to have a son. Through thy seed, all nations of the earth will be blessed. Well, they're getting on up in years. And there are times in the lives of even good people that their faith is not what it ought to be. Here's a situation where they seemingly want to help God out of a difficult situation. God has promised that you're going to have a child, and that's just looking less and less likely to happen. So we better do something pretty quick, or we never will have a child. Oh, I've got an idea. In our culture, we've got handmaids, slaves, and we'll make an arrangement here. This is not an immoral act of fornication. This is a marriage agreement. I'll give my handmaid to my husband to take as a second wife. He'll marry her, and then she'll have a child, and then that'll be my child. I'll raise up that child as if it were my own. Well, there's just a lot of problems that enter into the picture. Not too many women want to share their husband with another man. And these countries that we go to, when they start talking about polygamy, what's wrong with polygamy? And Abraham had more than one wife, and this one had, and this one had. And they said, what's wrong with having one or two wives, or three or four wives? And I always ask them one question, and that just seems to go away when you ask them that. So, okay, you think polygamy is okay? Then if polygamy is okay, what about a woman having more than one husband? Oh, no, that's a horrible idea. We're not for that. But the same guys that's for having three or four wives wouldn't dare let their wife have two different husbands. Well, what works one way ought to work the other way. If there's nothing wrong with it, there's nothing wrong with it either way. But people being the way they are, who wants to? We don't even. When we're in school, a girl don't even want. She's got a boyfriend. She don't want to share her boyfriend with another girl, let alone a husband. So it just doesn't work that way. And you're just asking for trouble when you deviate from God's plan and you have multiple wives. You're just asking for trouble. So they're going to help God out of a difficult situation, difficult circumstance. And God doesn't need any help. He doesn't need any help out of a difficult situation. God will take care of this situation as time moves on. Look at the things that's wrong with this idea of hers. Well, I'm getting too old. I can't have a child. Well, I've got this handmaid, and she's still of the childbearing age. And here, Abraham, you take her and marry her, and you have a child with her. Well, yeah, that's something else to consider about the religious aspect of this situation. First of all, this violated God's plan of a monogamous marriage from the beginning, as Jesus cited in Matthew 19. One man, one woman. Therefore shall a man leave his father and mother and cleave to his wife. That was God's pattern. Now, some deviated from God's pattern and had more than one, but that wasn't God's original plan. So you're going to deviate from God's plan, and you're going to do this, and this is going to be a bad example. As I said, the Muslims today and the Africans today, when they take a multiple wife, you know who they cite as their example? Well, Abraham did. He's the father of the faithful, and he was a great man of God. And he took more than one wife. You know, that's a lot like saying, well, Judas betrayed the Lord, so I guess I can betray the Lord too. No, that's not a good idea to do that. This was a sinful use of Hagar, who was not even consulted about her wishes. How would you like it? Somebody said, hey, you're going to marry this man over here. He's already got another wife. You're going to be his second wife. Would that be a wonderful thing for you? Good news? You're not even consulted. You're like a piece of property. You're like a cow or a goat that somebody's going to take and sell. We're going to do this with our property. You're my property. I'm going to give you to my husband. He's going to marry you. Well, that violates her autonomy there. It's presumptuous also to think that God needed any help. And even great people of faith sometimes, there's times in their life they don't have the faith they should. When Abraham went to Egypt and Abimelech sees the beauty of my wife, he'll kill me and take her. So what I'll do is I'll lie. I'll help God out of a difficult situation. Did God need any help? Could God not protect Abraham? Why would you lie, Abraham? Tell him the truth. This is my wife. Abimelech's not going to take your wife away from you and kill you, because God has already promised you you're going to have a son. So your faith is not where it ought to be there. Sometimes our faith gets weak. We look at a situation and we try to help God out of a difficult situation, and we wind up making a mess. That's usually what happens. God doesn't need any help. He knows exactly what's going on. Their plan, as we said, also encouraged others in the future to practice this idea of having a concubine or having polygamy. Solomon had 300 wives, or 700 wives, and 300 concubines. And again, he can say, well, Abraham did. Abraham is the father of the faithful. He did it, so why can't I do it? It seems that sometimes people don't always think about God's plan and the purity of God's plan and stay with God's plan. So this violated several different events in their lives. This occurred about 10 years after they entered the land. Abraham was 75 when he came into Canaan, Genesis 12, verse 4. Sarah was 10 years younger than Abram, Genesis 17:17. Thus, this present time, Abraham's about 85 and Sarah's 75. All right, and they're saying, well, this is too old to have a child. We can't have a child at age 75 and 85. Well, God said that's not old enough. God decided they need to be a little older, didn't he? God said, well, let's just wait. Wait till you're 100, Abraham. Sarah, wait till you're 90. She's 75 and worried about it. And there's 25 more years to go before God's going to make this thing happen. So he takes Hagar to be his wife. As I said, this is not immorality in their culture. This is not him just going in and committing fornication. He marries this woman. And under the law of Moses, God permitted them to do things of this nature, but he stipulated by giving certain rules. There were rules under the law, patriarchal and mosaical, when it comes along, of how you treat a slave. You couldn't just do anything you wanted to do to a slave. And if you married one of your slaves, there were rules and regulations that you had to go by and how you treat them. So Hagar becomes Abram's wife. But she's not on equality with Sarah. She's a handmaid. She's a servant. So this is Sarah's servant that now is stepping up and going to be a second wife. So we're sort of co-equal in that we're both wives, but I'm the senior wife. You're the junior wife. You're the slave wife. And again, isn't that just a recipe for disaster and hatred? And no wonder the Bible says that Sarah was despised in her eyes. And she's younger, and she conceives, and she's going to have a baby. And Sarah couldn't. All those years, she couldn't have a baby. And maybe there was a little taunting going on there. I gave him a son. You wasn't woman enough to give him a son, or whatever the argument might be. And they don't get along there. That's just, again, it's a recipe for disaster.
That really wrong. Sarah come up with that.
Yeah.
She come up.
That's true. And then she's going to be jealous over the situation. So she didn't think through the situation. And he should have been stronger in that situation and said, no, we don't need any help. God has promised us we're going to have a child, and we're going to have a child. So I don't know. His faith wasn't what it ought to have been at that particular point. And he goes along with her. Maybe he went along with her to keep peace. Sometimes it's easier to agree over something that you don't really want to do than it is to stand your ground. I don't know what the deal was, but he shouldn't have done that. He should have said, no, that's not what we're going to do. We're going to wait. But he goes along with it. That's her idea. But then when it happens, what did she think was going to happen? Did she think that Sarah or that Hagar wasn't going to love her husband? That wasn't going to be together? This is what marriage is all about, and you're doing this in order that she might have a child. And now she's going to have, now you're going to have a child, and I'm mad because you're going to have a child.
But that was how they kind of did it, right? Like in that culture, and it was perfectly acceptable.
Yeah. Now that seemed to be. So this is creating problems in their marriage, and it's creating problems for everybody that's involved. And the Bible talks about Sarah dealing harshly with Hagar. Well, you can understand that. You know, you're taking the place of me. My husband's thinking more of you than he does me. You gave him a child. I couldn't give him a child. So you're younger than me and all. So there's going to be some resentment. There's going to be some problems there. One of the commentaries I was reading said there may have been even beating involved. That you have the right to beat your servant. So she may have beat Sarah. So you force Sarah to marry him. She marries him. She's going to have a child. That's why she married him. And now she gets beat for marrying him and having a child. Where's the fairness there? She's being totally mistreated all the way around. And all of this is going on. She's not pleased with it at all. And she's going to leave. You can understand why she would do that. He goes to her. She conceives, and she's going to have a son. And Sarah said, my wrong be upon thee. Why didn't you stop me? Why did you listen to me? Anybody ever say that before in life? Yeah. You know, I'm supposed to listen to you until you come up with the wrong idea. Then I'm supposed to stop you. Maybe there's some wisdom there that we don't see. I have given my maid into thy bosom, and when she saw that she had conceived, I was despised in her eyes. The Lord judged between me and thee. You know, this is your fault, Abraham. You're to blame. You went along with this. Why did you go along with it? Well, he shouldn't have gone along with it. And she shouldn't have proposed it to start with. Abraham said to her, behold, thy maid is in thy hand. You know, they're sort of passing the buck here, aren't they? Why did you let me do this? Now look what you've caused me to do. And he said, well, she's your handmaid. She's not my handmaid. This wasn't my idea. This is your idea. You do with her what you want to do. I don't care. Whatever pleases you. Well, that's not a good idea either. Because she has got a bad attitude toward her, and they have some misunderstandings and hard feelings going on there. And Sarah, there's the verse that Sarah dealt hardly with her, or the idea of harshly, severe with her. And she fled. And you can understand that. You know, I didn't want this to start with. They forced me to marry this man. I didn't want to marry him. It's not my idea. And I married him. And the whole purpose of this was so I could have a child. And now I'm going to have a child. And what do? They're mean to me. They hate me. And I'm leaving. I can't stand this anymore. So, yeah. That's right. So she does. She fled. The angel of the Lord found her. And he said, Hagar, Sarah's maid, whence comest thou, and whither wilt thou go? She said, I flee from the face of my mistress Sarah. Well, the angel knew all this, but he's getting her to talk about it and say a few things about it. The angel of the Lord said unto her, return to thy mistress. Go back. Well, I don't want to do that. She's mean to me. Maybe she beat me. Maybe she says some very hateful things. She's jealous. She forced me to do something. Now she's mad at me for doing it. I don't want to do that. Go back and submit thyself under her hands. You are a servant. The Apostle Paul told a runaway servant to go home and be a servant and try to do the right thing. The angel of the Lord said unto her, I will multiply thy seed exceedingly, that it shall not be numbered for the multitude. Well, all of this started off as their plan and their scheme to have this child, and now God says, okay, you go back, and I'm going to multiply your seed. You're going to have there's a nation coming out of you as well. Now, this is not the child of promise. Isaac is going to be the child of promise, but there is one that's going to be born. And the angel tells her that she's going to have a son. Well, that removes all the doubt before all these tests that people run today and know what they're going to have. When the angel of the Lord tells you you're going to have a boy, that's pretty much 100% shot that you're going to have a boy, isn't it? Not only are you going to have a son, you're going to call his name Ishmael. Well, that narrows the field down of the names for your child too, when the angel of the Lord tells you what to do. Because the Lord hath heard thy affliction, and she has been mistreated. She is afflicted, and she's suffering. And God has heard this. God hears the suffering of the afflicted, and he's concerned about it. So he says of him, this child, Ishmael, he will be a wild man. His hand will be against every man, and every man's hand against him. He shall dwell in the presence of all his brethren. That's an interesting prophecy, and he's going to be a wild man. Everybody is going to have problems with him, and his descendants, of course, were the Arab people, and more specific today, the Muslims. And it seems like they have a hard time getting along with people, don't they? If we're out there, wherever they are throughout the world. We were watching something on TV about that just recently, and I think they were in Dearborn, Michigan, trying to do a Sharia law and all, and they were chanting, "Death to all Americans." And I thought, well, why are you living in America? If you feel that way, death to all Americans. So there's a problem with a lot of these folks, and they're going to be warriors against each other. Look at today. Who is Israel's greatest threat today? Islam, Muslims. And the Muslim would say, if they could wipe out anybody and wipe them off the face of the earth and kill everybody, who would it be? The Jews. We despise the Jews. So their descendants are still, they're brothers, yeah. And they're still at odds. They're the same family. And they're still fighting each other and hatred for each other. And he calls the name of the Lord that spoke to her, "Thou God seest me," for she said, "Have I also here looked after him that seeth me?" Wherefore the well was called Bir Laharoa, because it is between Kadesh and Bered. Hagar bore Abram a son, and called his name, of course, Ishmael. That's what God said call him. Abram was 86 years old when Hagar bare Ishmael. So Abram was 86 years old. That is 86. And Abram was 100 when Isaac was born. So Ishmael is 14. He was 14 when Isaac was born. So he's 14 years older than Isaac, and they wouldn't grow up together as equals and playmates. The 14-year-old is almost a grown man out in the field working, and then the little 1-year-old is down here. So there would be a big difference in there too. Now the rest of our time, I wanted to go ahead and finish those 16 verses, not a whole lot there. But the rest of our time I want us to spend looking at Galatians chapter 4. As we continue the story. It's not over. We're going to go to the New Testament and look at the...
It matters, but wasn't it people are possibly very young? Probably, right?
I don't know what age. We're not told. Doesn't say, no. She was...
She's going to have, a lot more kids.
Yeah. And of course the thing would be too, like with Sarah, with Abraham, with Isaac, his descendants would be as the stars, but that didn't mean that Sarah would have another child. It's just the descendants, the bloodline that's on down. So I don't know. But in Galatians chapter 4, beginning with verse 21, the Apostle Paul, in the book of Galatians, is trying to get the Christians, the Jewish Christians, that are turning back from Christianity and going back into Judaism. That was a problem. And he would tell them that you're not justified by the law. If you think you're justified by the law, you're fallen from grace. And you want to go back and practice the ordinance of circumcision? Well, if you do that, you're a debtor to do the whole law. And if you're doing the whole law, why did Christ die on the cross for you? Well, it's vain, empty. If you can be justified with the law of Moses, then Christ didn't have to die on the cross. So he's going to go back, starting with verse 21. I don't know if your Bible has a heading there, but mine does. It says an allegory. Here's the allegory of Sarah. This allegory here of these two women that we're going to look at. The word means the idea of another, or to speak. It signifies a thing that represents another. Here is something that is representative of spiritual meaning. We're going to talk about Hagar and see what she represents in this allegory, and then we're going to see what Sarah represents in this allegory. Tell me, ye that desire to be under the law, do you not hear the law? For it is written that Abraham had two sons, the one by a bondmaid and the other by a free woman. All right, he's going to go back and make a play on that. The bondwoman had a son, and there's bondage associated with being a bond person, having a child. And then you've got Sarah, who's a free woman, and she has a child. Her child is free. He's not born in bondage. But he, who was of the bondwoman, was born after the flesh. But he of the free woman was by promise. Well, there's nothing miraculous about Ishmael's birth at all. But there is something a little bit unique about Isaac's birth, and that this 90-year-old woman is going to give birth, and a 100-year-old man. And that in and of itself would be unique. If she had had 10 children before, and now she has her 11th child when she's 90 years old, that would be a remarkable thing. But she's been barren all of her life. Yeah. She's never had even one child, which is something that maybe she could have done and had a greater hope when she's in her 20s, 30s, or even 40s, but not in her 90s. If you can't have a child in your 30s or 40s, why would you think you could have one in your 90s? So this is something, and God promised that that's what's going to take place. This is going to happen. You're going to have this child. And as I said, they thought, well, we'll help God out, and it'll be Ishmael. No, he's not the child of promise. He's the fleshly child. He's not the one that was born of the promise. Which things are an allegory. All right, here's that word again that Paul's using. That is, one is born of a free woman, and one is born in slavery. One is born of promise, the other is born just the natural process of birth. Which things are an allegory, for these are the two covenants. Now there's the purpose of what he's talking about. These two women represent two covenants. Hagar represents one covenant, and Sarah represents another covenant. The one from Mount Sinai, which gendereth to bondage, which is Hagar or Hagar. So one of these is bondage, and the other is freedom. Now those of you that are trying to keep the law of Moses, you're in bondage, because you had to keep it perfectly in order to be pleasing in the sight of God, and nobody can keep it perfectly except Jesus. He's the only one that ever kept it perfectly. So he's using that as an analogy. And then he goes on. And he said, for this Hagar is Mount Sinai in Arabia, and answereth to Jerusalem, which now is, and is in bondage with her children. So he uses two different mountains and talks about one of them being in bondage and the other one not being in bondage. But Jerusalem, which is above, is free, which is the mother of us all. Now that's representing the new covenant. And that's where we ought to be, not going back under the old law of Moses, but the mother of us all. We ought to be in the covenant where we're free and we enjoy all those freedoms. For it is written, rejoice thou barren that bearest not, thou barren that bearest not, he said, break forth and cry, that thou travailest not, for the desolate hath made more children than she which hath an husband. Now, we brethren are Isaac, now brethren, we brethren, as Isaac was, are the children of promise. Now, wait a minute, dear. You're a Christian. You're the child of promise. And if you're trying to go back under the law of Moses, you're trying to go back Hagar, Ishmael. Well, that's not the child of promise. That's not where salvation is. And you don't need to be trying to go back under something that was inferior. You left that which is inferior. The law was our schoolmaster to bring us to Christ. It was a shadow of good things to come. You want to go back under the shadow? No, you got the real thing over here. You had the shadow over there, and they're wanting to leave the real thing and go back under the shadow. And Paul's saying, no, don't do that. That's not what you ought to do. And he's trying to get them, by understanding, as they would have this background of understanding about Hagar and Ishmael and all this, he's trying to get them to understand and see what they're doing. What's the fruit of what they're trying to do. And we, brethren, as Isaac was, are the children of promise. If you're a Christian, you're a child of Abraham by promise. Not like Ishmael. But as then, he that was born after the flesh persecuted him that was born after the Spirit. Even so it is now. What were the Jews doing to the Christians? Persecuting them. So the descendant of Hagar would be persecuting Isaac. Isaac, you think you're better than me. I'm older than you. There may have been some of that going on too as they got a little older. In the house, there were certainly some problems with the women. Nevertheless, what saith the Scripture? Cast out the bondwoman and her son, for the son of the bondwoman shall not be heir with the son of the free woman. Who's going to get the inheritance? Isaac. Okay? You've left. You were a Jew. You obeyed the gospel. Now you're going back to Judaism. You're not going to be an heir there. What are you going to inherit? There. The inheritance is Christ. Through Abraham and his seed, all nations of the earth will be blessed. Not going back under Abraham, his seed. So he's mentioning that to them. What saith the Scripture? Cast out the bondwoman and her son, for the son of the bondwoman shall not be heir with the son of the free woman. So then, here's his conclusion to all of that. So then, brethren, we are not the children of the bondwoman, but of the free. Be content to be where you are. You're a Christian. You're not going to improve yourself by leaving Christianity and going back under the law of Moses. You're leaving. That's like you escaped Egyptian bondage and you're out here and you said, no, we think we're going to go back and be a slave again. No. You're free now. And you're going to a land flowing with milk and honey that's going to be yours. No, we don't like that. We're going to go back under the slavery. No, don't be a slave. He's trying to get them to see that and understand these principles that are there. So here is this allegory that helps us a little bit more to understand what's going on. And Paul used that because they had a knowledge of Sarah and Hagar and what's going on.
That references back to Isaiah 54, right? Like where it says, it's talking about this very thing prophesied.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I haven't checked that recently on that, but I'm sure that's right. All right. We'll stop there and continue our study with Abraham and his family and some other problems that they'll face.